All right, good morning, everyone. So, remember we talked about National Day and how you had this massive Chinese military parade, right? Can you emphasize how it kind of gave him a sense of pride? And so we have to understand that this kind of idea of emphasizing military has a lot to do with how Chinese history is going to develop, right? So far in the century of humiliation, we've seen a lot of military defeats. And what's key to the success of the revolution that overthrows the Qing dynasty is the new army. Right, the new army. We talked about how the Qing do accept that they need a stronger army, and that means modernizing the army, and that means also bringing in modern ideas to a certain respect. And also, remember, Sun Yat-sen will target the soldiers. Soldiers tend to be patriotic, tend to love their country, right? That's your job. You love your country so much you're willing to sacrifice for it. And so they're very receptive to someone arguing this is the way we need to strengthen the country, and they're very receptive to ideas of nationalism. So many soldiers are going to be under Sun Yat-sen's influence, and even those who aren't don't really care that much about the Qing. They're primarily loyal to their commanders, because remember, it's primarily the commanders who pay the soldiers, not the Qing itself. Remember, they have these provincial armies. So the major people paying the soldiers are the commanders, so they're going to be more loyal to them. And I gave an example, they're even allowed to cut off their queues, which is really surprising. Remember, that's one of the first things the Manchus did to make sure everyone was loyal. Got to grow your hair long and braid it, you got to cut off the front of your hair. They go back from that. So this is kind of dangerous. Now, what's curious is the kind of the kindling or the gunpowder that's going to lead to the eventual revolution has to do with railways. Remember, we talked about how the Qing want foreign investment in central control of railways. Railways are very important for developing your economy and for your army. But nationalist Chinese want local control and oppose foreign investment. You don't want to borrow money from foreign countries because later on they can use that to justify taking over your country. That's what Britain, for example, did to Egypt. So, and the army, of course, is particularly concerned because they need the railways to move their troops around. So we talked about then there's going to be a fight over this in the city of Chengdu, right here, over this, where you have the people of Chengdu in the local region are building their own railway. The Qing government come in and take it over, and instead of paying them for it, they give them government bonds, which are basically worthless. They're not really worth that much. You know, the bond is maybe says this is worth $500, but in actuality, it's only worth like $100 on the market. So the locals see this as theft and protest. The government will crack down on them. They'll respond by forming what's called the Railway Protection Movement, continue protesting, and then the Qing will send an army to crush this, and the people will actually fight back. So we have street fighting going on. Now, one thing I did not mention so far, and I got to go back to this, is what's called the Wuchang Rising. Now, just to give you a sense of how there's a kind of competition in China today, or among Chinese, you could say, about different political systems. So we said National Day is October 1st, and that's the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic in 1949. That was the day that Tianyu was celebrating with other Chinese and Annie. But in Taiwan, which calls itself the Republic of China, they're going to celebrate what's called Double 10, October 10th, which is a different day. That's the day when the revolution is said to have begun. On October 10th, what happens is in the city of Wuhan, what's called the Wuchang Rising, because there's a bunch of people, there's other cities involved, and this whole region is called Wuchang, but there's a single city of Wuhan. It is really confusing. That's why I'm not bolding these and asking you to remember these terms. I just want to emphasize, you got Chengdu, which isn't that far away. It has commercial connections with this area. This is the city of Wuhan, but this whole region is kind of things are going on. There's lots of revolutionaries. And what happens is on October 10th, the revolutionaries are going to have a bomb-making party. Right? They have a party where they're going to get together and make bombs. Right? That's what you do when you're revolutionary. And one thing, though, you should never do as a revolutionary at a bomb-making party is smoke. Do not smoke while making bombs. Smoking is hazardous to your health. It's extra hazardous when you're making bombs. And when they were making bombs, they were basically in this revolutionary's apartment in his kitchen, and they were making bombs. And the guy who was smoking was careless, and so the ashes fell in the explosives and ignited them. Killed some of them, destroyed the kitchen. And imagine if you're a neighbor of someone and their apartment blows up, right? Explodes. You're going to call the police and the fire department, right? So the authorities show up. And not only did they discover that there's these revolutionaries, they discovered the revolutionaries had kept a list of all the revolutionaries. If you're part of a secret society dedicated to overthrowing the government and membership in that secret society could lead to you being killed, Do not write down a list of all the members of your group. So at this point, the revolutionaries say, look, we have to do something, because if we just sit here and wait, we're going to die. So they're going to launch a revolution, right? They're going to go ahead and try and seize power in their local city. So just notice that, you know, when you think of the American Revolution, you think of this thing that's kind of organized, right? I mean, it's not completely organized, but there's this revolutionary leadership that's very close and tight-knit. That's not what's happening in the Chinese Revolution. There's not like a single leader there or a group of leaders you can easily point to. It's much more chaotic, right? You have people here who are angry, you have people here who are angry, and this kind of general atmosphere of anger, and then incidents like a bomb explosion is going to lead people to say, well, let's rise up anyway and let's see what happens. So like I said previously, there's risings throughout the countries, there's a series of massacres, and things get really, really violent, right? Things are going to get really violent. Now, do you remember I showed you that scene from the Jackie Chan movie, right, where Chu Jin was executed? That's how it opens. I want to show you a scene from the same movie, which depicts this rising, right? So we're in this area in Wuhan. The people here are upset already because of what's going on here with the railway. So in Wuhan, after the explosion, the army is called out. And that's when things get really interesting, right? Because remember, the army has people who are loyal to the Qing, some people who want to overthrow the Qing, and then people in between. So this clip's a little long, it's about 7 minutes, but I want to show you it to really emphasize the chaos of this time period, right? To really emphasize the difficulties that are going on. And this is just explaining how that's the explosion I just talked about, though they kind of dramatize it. They don't want to kind of mention that it was an accident. But here, now they're punishing the people who they captured involved in the explosion.
Not a mutiny! This is heaven's punishment!
And those are revolutionary soldiers.
We execute them today!
Those are Qing soldiers.
And a warning to all!
Order. We found the list. What should we do?
Yeah, the list I mentioned.
What execute you? Sergeant tonight. Kill everyone on the list.
No one will be spared!
So, better do something. That's Revolutionary Army. That's the book Zhou Rong wrote. Right, that's the book Zhou Rong wrote. Remember the guy who was very anti-Manchu? Those guys were reading that book. Notice the officers have cues, others don't.
What are you doing?
Yeah, remember Li Yunhong?
What are your names?
Xiao Beikun of the 8th Regiment. Jin Chao Long of the 8th Regiment.
Bad dubbing, sorry.
It's a crisis. Control your temper, sir.
What's this? You want a mutiny? Not sleeping? What are you doing? What is this? It's a mutiny! Taking shape! Brother. Put down your rifle, okay?
I want a mutiny! How many more of us will you kill? You're actually lucky that I'm the one aiming at you.
Brother! This isn't a joke!
If we don't do it now, then when?
October 10th, revolutionaries from the 8th Army Engineering Battalion are going to rise up in rebellion. Those are old Army soldiers, the ones that have those red hats. Those are traditional Qing soldiers. Those are probably Manchu. I love Chinese and Korean movies because they have footnotes. So you know all the characters.
Ready! Aim at dimension! Load the cannon!
talk later.
Haven't we discussed
That was Sun Yat-sen. Now there's that's the emperor's mother. Remember, Shishi is dead. That's the emperor. That kid. That's Puyi.
There's been a lot of criticism. People are saying we're giving away our country's sovereignty.
Sure. If we're not their rulers, then what good is this country?
Does not present the Manchu well.
General Lee, time is short. Please decide.
Haven't I treated you well? Why are you making it so difficult?
We asked that you lead the military government.
What's so difficult? Drop your gun! Drop it!
Generally, you've treated us well. All we ask is, lead us now.
There's talent among the revolutionaries. Esther went to be your leader.
Lee Yun-ho! Naturally, we will have a revolutionary member as our leader. But at present, Sun Wen is abroad, and Wang Keching is on his way here. That's why we offer you this. Lee Yun-ho, do you understand?
I'll give you my imperial position, but I don't want to become your official either. I want to go home. You don't know the real situation? Although Wu Cheng and Zhang Bao are in hiding, if the court's army were to counterattack, it would be a massacre. They destroy Wu Cheng.
Why did they move them?
He can't fire at us! From a German battle, you heard!
They're trying to force him to become their commander.
I will die because of you people.
Remove the ammunition, quick! They will die together! You're the owners of the revolutionary march!
I'm Li Yonghong, general of the mixed brigade. I'm military governor Li Yonghong. If you want to live, return to your position. Attention, soldiers! Sir! Target medicine to you! Target medicine to you! Distance 2,400 feet! Distance 2,400 feet! Load the cannon! Load the cannon! Prepare for rapid firing! Round one! Rapid firing, round one! Fire! Fire! Distance 2,350 feet! 25 degrees to the right! Load them up! Fire on three cannons! Fire! Fire! Ceasefire!
Why are we stopping?
You asked me to take command, so I make all the decisions.
Why'd they stop?
No ammunition.
No, sir. Should we fire back to test them? Why do that? Save ourselves. Retreat!
Retreat!
Even if we annihilate Yin Chang today, doesn't make a difference. He's nobody. The real battle is ahead of us.
Yes, sir.
Got my cue? Fine. Do it. Since you bestowed such an honor on me, I'll join you and break the law!
I love the transition between his hair and the wheat. I love Jackie Chan, but not a good movie. But it does.
What's this called again?
1911, because it's after the Revolution 1911. But you get my point, right? This is a very complex, very chaotic situation that China is in. Right? It's not clear who's in charge. It's not clear where someone's loyalties are. Li Yuhong, he is a real guy that was convinced eventually to lead the rebels. They don't mention there. This is what my instructor told me when I took a similar class to this. Initially, he was approached by the revolutionary people to lead their army, and he responded by stabbing the messenger to death. So he was initially not pro-revolution, but eventually he decided to throw in his lot with the revolution. There, they sanitized it a bit. Though they made him whiny as all get out. I'd like to hear the original Chinese actor, because good lord, it's like, why do you want this whiny baby to be your commander? But he did okay once he was out there. But it's chaotic. There's all these things going on. They don't show it in the movie, but there are massacres. The Manchu will sometimes massacre Han. The Han will massacre Manchu when they can. Eventually what happens, and this is very important, numerous provinces will secede from the empire and then join together to form into a republic, the Republic of China, right? Which now, like I said, the island of Taiwan is ruled by an institution that calls itself the Republic of China. This is where it finds its roots. That's why they celebrate Double 10, which is a cool name for a holiday, I have to say. That's what they celebrate here, because that started on October 10th. Sun Yat-sen, like I said last time, is elected president. Right? He will become president of this new republic. He finds out while he's in Colorado. Right? Remember, he's reading a newspaper. I think maybe he's even on a train, and that's when he finds out he's president. The Republican forces do have a lot of success, but eventually they kind of run out of steam, and there's fear of foreign intervention. Right? The longer this civil war, and this is a civil war in a sense, goes on, the more chance there are that foreign countries might intervene, and no one wants that in China. So that's going to lead to compromise. That's going to lead to a discussion, and that's where this guy Yuan Shikai comes in. Yuan Shikai was a disciple of Li Hongzhang, and he fulfilled basically when Li Hongzhang died, Yuan Shikai is going to take over for him. He is a commander of what's called the Beiyang Army, which is one of China's most modern advanced armies, centered around Beijing, the capital of China. So he has an extraordinarily important position. However, unlike Li Hongzhang, the Qing did not trust him and forced him to retire. One day in a newspaper, newspapers are great. He's reading the newspaper one day, and in the newspaper it says, Yuan Shikai is retiring from his command of the Beiyang Army because of a leg injury. Nothing was wrong with his leg. That's just what the government was saying to get rid of him. Right? So the government says, you're no longer commander because you have a bad leg. He was fine. He wasn't injured, but that's what the government said. However, remember, the army is essentially still loyal to this guy. The official officers often have more loyalty to their commanders than to the army. So he still has a lot of power. And when the Qing are losing really badly, and the other commander that they had appointed doesn't have the loyalty of the soldiers, so they don't do what he says, the Qing turn to him and say, please help us, please lead your army into battle. And he's like, oh, my leg still hurts. He puts it back on them. He says, I'm not going to lead an army, but I will broker a compromise. I will make a compromise. And so he arranges the abdication of the emperor, and the emperor basically gets a lot of money and gets to live in the Forbidden City. Right, that's the deal, but he gives up power. And in return, Yuan Shikai gets to be president. Sun Yat-sen is a good sport and says that's fine. Right, Sun Yat-sen doesn't have an army. This guy does. That's why, like I said, the images from National Day video, keep thinking of that, keep thinking about how Tianyu emphasized the pride from having a strong army. Notice how the army's making the rules. Whoever's got the military is in charge, basically. This guy can become president, even though Sun Yat-sen was elected, because he's got the army. But like I said, no one wants this war to continue because that will bring foreign intervention, which will lead to the division of China. So there is a compromise brokered by Yuan Shikai, one that he benefits from because he gets to be president. We're not done with Mr. Yuan, but there's a couple other things we need to talk about before we get back to Mr. Yuan. So he doesn't. I want to emphasize he goes into section 6. So the Qing and the dynastic cycle are gone. That's little Pu Yi, the emperor of China who was forced to abdicate. He's like 4 or 5 years old. We've seen the last emperor, it's about him. And now people are forced to cut off their queues. Right? We've gone back. Remember that from AQ, how these guys were cutting off their queues to show they were part of the revolution? Now that's required. And this is a major revolution because it not only ends the dynasty, but it ends the whole idea of an imperial China. It ends the whole idea of the mandate of heaven. And instead it's replaced with the idea of a republic. Rule of the people, for the people, by the people. So this is a massive revolution because it doesn't just change the dynasty, it changes the whole political system of China. So a few announcements before we continue. We might start section 6 today, more likely on Wednesday. Right, so that's something we need to think about. The review quiz will open Friday and close Sunday, so opens today and closes Sunday. The reading quiz already opened on Wednesday and will close Sunday, so keep that in mind. Remember, there are 2 quizzes. And one thing I want to emphasize, I want to return, I hope that Wednesday made sense. Remember, I took a little bit of break to talk about National Day, and I don't know if that made sense. I hope it did. But the key thing is my goal here is not just to help you know some things about China, it's to understand China. Right? So the idea is not just, remember some years or some people. The idea is that through knowing those things, you can understand this country. Right? You can understand especially better why China is the way it is. And that was a big point I was trying to make. I don't know if I succeeded, I'm a historian. It's hard for me to deal with current events. I'm used to things that's like 50 years old at least. But that's something. And there was one thing I forgot to mention that I want to bring back up. Before I do that, really quickly, Andy sent me another video, and it's like I can't. There's limited time, so I didn't want to show you a picture from the. I took a screenshot of the video. We keep talking about Annie. That's Annie on National Day in Shanghai. Notice she has placed Chinese flags on her cheeks and on her head. Right. So this very patriotic young lady. So that's why she keeps sending me wonderful stuff. I wish we had enough time to watch it all. Actually, I can keep this off. But there was one thing I forgot, and Tianyu, I emailed him. He's a good sport, and I wanted him to tell us something. This is President Xi Jinping, and he's wearing something kind of interesting, right? He's dressed very differently, isn't he, from everyone else, right? It's called Shaoshan?
Zhongshan.
Zhongshan. What's that mean?
Because Sun Yat-sen, the guy we have mentioned in our class,
right.
His real Chinese name is called Sun Zhongshan.
Right.
So the Zhongshan suit is kind of
right.
originating from his name.
Excellent.
Yeah, so I think maybe he wears the shirt is because not only to show respect for Sun Yat-sen,
right,
but also to emphasize its very importance of the National Day parade.
Excellent. And so, what kind of feeling does that give you? Wearing that suit. Like, if you see that, what does that make you think or feel?
He respects the history.
Excellent. So, right, this is a suit. I'll come back to that. That was developed by Sun Yat-sen. Right? And it was very popular in China. There's Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong, who were mortal enemies. Notice they're both wearing the same suit. Right? They're both wearing the exact same suit. So what you wear is very important. I tried to emphasize this in class before, right? And he's chosen to wear back this shirt, and as Tianyu emphasized, this makes him think of proud kind of Chinese history. Now it's funny though, and this is important to understand this, because people can perceive the same symbols or images in completely different ways. So for Tianyu, he emphasized, this kind of great pedigree, right? This is something that Sun Yat-sen emphasized. One thing I want to point out, do you know what this is based on originally? Like what this original Sun Yat-sen was inspired by?
Japan.
Yeah, it was inspired by Japanese military, like cadet. Like if you were at a military school, this is similar to what you would wear. He made it more simple, I think, but that's the idea. So it shows a desire to modernize, and notice how that's connected to the military. This is a revised military uniform. And it shows the importance that Chinese put on the military. You can kind of see why. As the system breaks down, the military is the one that can bring order. But what's interesting, if you're a Western person, you're more likely, do you know what we call this in the West, this kind of suit? Oops. We call it a Mao suit. When I Googled the picture, I looked up Mao suit after Mao Zedong. So a lot of times, and even I had forgotten this, I had forgotten that this was connected to Sun Yat-sen. A lot of Western people, especially my age, say this is a Mao suit. So we think of things a little bit differently. We think of Mao Zedong, and we think of communism when we think of this. Right? So that was the image that came to my mind when I saw it. So we're perceiving these symbols in very different ways, right, when you watch this. And to give you one more example, right? Oops, oh darn it, I lost. When I saw the military parade, for Tianyu, that was a point of pride. And I don't know what our Western or American students thought when they saw this. Now, I'm from the Cold War era. So when I saw that military parade, I thought, oh my gosh, it's another Cold War. This is the 1984 Soviet Union parade. That's what I thought of. Right? So that's why, for Tianyu, it's a point of pride. For me, it's something a little bit different, right? And so we're reading it in completely different ways, right? For me, I read that as like, oh my gosh, it's another Cold War. Good Lord, the first one was bad enough. I don't want another one. Though it beats a hot war. Right, so this is the, thank you, Carrie, I'm glad so. No one's been laughing at my jokes today. And one thing I just want to highlight this, because this goes back to kind of what I was talking about with Armir last time. This is kind of the American ideal of what a military looks like, right? These are militiamen from the American Revolution. Notice they're not even wearing the same uniform. So that's why, again, how Americans might read these things differently. From a Chinese perspective, there's this idea of order and discipline and a strong military. For us, our military should be democratic. Right? Like I said, this is kind of the idea.
It seems more individualistic.
Yeah, exactly. So we read these things very differently. To us, these are what the heroes look like. They don't wear something like this. This is too uniform. So I just want to point these things out so you can better understand Chinese history and how it's problematic if we just read it from our categories. Right? Like I said, I see a threat, but maybe no threat was intended because of my generation, what I lived through. Okay. So enough strolling down memory lane. Let's finally get to section 6. So in this section, we're looking at the new republic and the rise of radicalism. Right? China does not stay a liberal democracy. Right? That's what the Republic of China is supposed to be. That's what Sun Yat-sen is leaning to. It's not going to stop it. So our objectives here, we're going to try and trace the rise and fall of the republic. We're going to try and understand the problem of nationalism and understand why many Chinese people would turn to radical ideas rather than a Western liberal democracy. When I mean problem of nationalism, I'm talking about how China is a multi-ethnic country. Right? That's what I want to highlight. China is a multi-ethnic country. We'll also see how old ideas about family and gender were challenged. We'll also see the beginnings of communism in China. So we're going to step back, right? So we ended the Qing in the last section. Now we're going to start the republic. I don't expect you to remember these dates, right? I don't expect you to remember these exact dates, but I do want you to understand kind of what's going on. January 1st was the day that Sun Yat-sen was elected president. February 13th, he resigns presidency, and then by agreement, Yuan Shikai is elected president by what's called the National Council, which was this revolutionary government, on February 14th. So they totally had this plan, right? This was part of the deal. Sun gives up the presidency, Yuan Shikai takes it. And what's interesting is that the one key thing about Yuan Shikai was he had been elected premier by the National Assembly set up by the Qing. So what I'm trying to say, and that's kind of like a prime minister, what I'm trying to emphasize is that Yuan Shikai is kind of an ideal transition because he's been recognized by the Qing and by the Republic as like a leader. So theoretically, he has high legitimacy. Both sides in the Civil War recognized him as president or prime minister or chief executive. What will happen then is they will establish a provisional constitution. If you're not familiar with the term provisional constitution, it means a temporary constitution. It's like, we're just throwing this thing together, we're going to fix it later, but right now we need something. We'll get together later and build something new. It's not exactly the same, but it's like, you remember the United States, we started off with the Articles of Confederation, and then later on we developed the Constitution. It's a bit different because they had planned this. They said this Constitution is only going to be temporary, but similar. Right? We're going to have a temporary Constitution, and we'll hold national elections, new elections, which will write a permanent Constitution. The nationalists do really well in this election, and they're called the Kuomintang. This is Sun's party. And I'm going to call them nationalists. When I say nationalists with a capital N, I mean Sun Yat-sen's political party, just to make that clear. So the nationalists, Sun Yat-sen's political party, the Kuomintang, these guys do really well in the elections. And Sun Yat-sen has a supporter named Song Jiao-rin. Song Jiao-rin wants a strong legislature, right? He wants a strong legislature, which puts him at odds with Yuan Shikai, who as president would like a strong president. He wants a strong executive branch. So there's a different understanding of how the government will work, right? Yuan Shikai, the guy we just talked about, he wants to have a strong president in the new constitution. Song Jiao-rin wants a strong legislature in the new constitution. He also isn't happy because Yuan Shikai, in order to keep the government working, is borrowing huge amounts of money from foreigners. Right? He's borrowing huge amounts of money from foreigners. So this guy is a powerful politician, has a bunch of support in the legislature from the Nationalist Party, and is criticizing Yuan Shikai and disagrees with Yuan Shikai about what should be done. So what ends up happening then is Song gets assassinated. He gets off of a train, and someone comes up and shoots him, and he dies. And there's arguments. Yuan Shikai never takes credit for it, but it was most likely Yuan Shikai who organized the assassination. So Song has been assassinated, so Yuan Shikai will now keep up his momentum. He will make the Nationalist Party illegal. Right? He's going to make the Nationalist Party illegal. He will force through a constitution where he will be a powerful president, and then he forces through his election. He was actually elected by the legislature. And he will then weaken the legislature. Right? So Yuan Shikai is trying to make a very powerful president and is willing to use assassination to do that. This is not a good way for a republic to start. Right? This is not a good way for a republic to start. And think about this. What if Thomas Jefferson had tried to assassinate Alexander Hamilton? That's kind of what happened here. Right? Now you're probably thinking Aaron Burr, but remember that was a duel. That's a little bit different. Aaron Burr was a jerk and an outlier. Sorry. I like Alexander Hamilton. So, we'll have to explain to you, this is an American history joke, sorry. Okay, yeah, sorry. So here's a big problem the People's Republic of China has. Their president doesn't believe in democracy. Right? The president the president of the republic does not believe in republics. That's really bad. And Yuan Shikai is essentially a dictator. And again, clothing is important. That's not how presidents dress typically. Right? He's wearing what is clearly a military uniform. That's not typically how presidents dress. Remember, what you wear is very important. Now, Yuan has a big problem. That's the problem with taxes. First of all, just in general, remember, China has always had a problem with taxes. I've tried to emphasize in this class, it's very hard for them to collect taxes. And in order for his legislature to work, or in order to deal with these problems, he needs more money. But he doesn't want to just collect taxes because that would mean giving the legislature more power. Right? And you think about it this way, right? One of the first things you say, when you write like a letter or email to your congressperson, it's like, I'm a taxpayer, and I want you to do this. Right? When you pay taxes, that gives you the right to kind of tell your government what to do. And he doesn't want the government to be told what to do. He doesn't want, he has trouble collecting taxes because you always have trouble collecting taxes. He doesn't want to work with the legislature. The legislature would be the logical people to raise taxes because the argument is if you pay your taxes, we will, you have a say in how to use your money, but he doesn't want the legislature to have any power. So he's not able to effectively collect taxes, so his government will rely on foreign loans. Right? Most of the funding for the government will be based on foreign loans, which, as I said before, is very dangerous. It means he doesn't have to listen to the Chinese people. He can do whatever he wants. And also, like I said, whenever you borrow money from someone else, they have power over you. And this gives foreign countries a lot of power over China. Now, what's interesting, he was astute. He wanted to get foreign support. So one of the first things he did when he became president was he issued a proclamation asking Western people to pray for China. And the missionaries loved this, right? You can guess, right? He issued this public proclamation asking that people pray for China and the new republic. And this increased foreign support. So you can see one reason this guy is not popular, right? Perhaps among the Chinese today. I think, right, Tianyu, I'm sure you studied Yuan Shikai, right? No one likes him. Is that correct?
Yeah, no.
He doesn't really, he's looking for power from foreign people, not from Chinese people, right? He's not really a nationalist. He doesn't really believe in democracy. He's just trying to empower himself. And to give you an idea of the problems he faces, so World War I breaks out. Europeans are really busy with the whole war thing. And so Japan says, this is the perfect time to expand our power. Right? Japan says this is the perfect time to expand our power. And they're going to issue what are called the 21 demands. I'm not going to go through all 21 demands, but Japan just says flat out to China, here's 21 things you have to do. Right? There's no negotiation. This is what you're going to do. This would give Japan economic privileges in China, give Japan special access to Chinese raw materials, for example. It would put Japanese advisors in the Chinese government. So imagine, like, if President Trump was meeting with his cabinet and there was a person from Canada there watching and listening to what they said and then giving them advice about how to do things. You can understand the Chinese would not be happy about this. Right? They don't want Japanese advisors in their private government meetings telling them what to do. And also China would have to purchase Japanese military supplies. Right? So Japan would get access to economic privileges and get special access to Chinese markets and Chinese resources, and Japan would have to buy stuff from China. China would have to buy stuff from Japan. Now, here you can get a sense of how weak China was. Remember I said things get worse. Yuan Shikai's response was to leak this. The Chinese said, don't tell anyone about this. Yuan Shikai leaked this. That was it. That was his only response, was to try and leak it so he could obtain foreign help. And then the Europeans and the Americans put pressure on Japan to withdraw most of these demands. But China, you can see, is in a bad situation already. You have a government that is relying not on the Chinese people, but essentially on foreign powers to stay in power, to stay in control, and having to balance them off of each other. Right? Oh, the Japanese want too much, we'll tell the Americans and the British and the French, and they'll take care of us. So this is a bad situation. In order to try and strengthen his rule, Yuan Shikai decides that Confucianism should be the state religion. He actually makes Confucianism the state religion. And in 1916, he will declare himself emperor. And there he is as Emperor Yuan Shikai. This is a terrible idea. Very few people, all the Chinese people just think this is nuts. Right? No one, he totally squanders his credibility. There's very little support to this. There's a lot of opposition. So people who really believe in democracy or just don't like Yuan Shikai, they secede. Some provinces will secede. One thing you'll notice is that when you listen like China today, like I think President Xi Jinping kind of mentioned this, was he said the motherland is going to stay together. We're going to complete the unification of the motherland, right? Because they actually are having people secede, right? Provinces are saying, we're going to leave China. This is the second time in like 5 years that this has happened, right? Remember, it happened to the Qing, now it's happening to the Republic. So people who want to continue the Republic secede, and then there's some people who are like, you know what? If we're going to have an empire, let's just go back to the Manchus. And there's actually a restoration army that restores Puyi to power. It lasts about 3 days. But there is a group led by a Mongol general who wears a queue who actually seizes Beijing and puts Puyi back on the throne. They're defeated, but again, you can see the problems we have here. China is still divided. You can see why, by the way, remember how Lu Xun said, we had a political change, but nothing's really changed? You can see why he said that, right? Remember Na Q? Nothing's changed. We still have these problems. We're still not unified. And Yuan then just dies. He just gets sick and dies in the middle of this. So this is great. He messes up everything and then dies. It's a really bad situation. Like I said, this is a failed attempt to restore Puyi and the Qing dynasty, right? There's these people who want to put Puyi back on the throne. So China has a lot of problems. And Sun Yat-sen is still around, right? Sun Yat-sen is still around. So I have a clip I'm going to play for you. As you watch this clip, it's going to tell us a little bit about now what China's like after Yuan Shikai dies. Because you got to be like, who's in charge now? Right? Sun resigned the presidency, the Qing are gone, and Yuan Shikai is gone. Who's in charge now, right? So what is China divided into? What is Sun's political situation? Who does Sun Yat-sen have to rely on and why? How are his ideas changing? And what's leading him to rethink his ideas? Okay, let's take a shot at this. And we're back to the extra credits, so I hope you like that. Thank you for the support.
Yuan is dead, and China ignites into a cycle of never-ending crisis. Instead of restoring constitutionalism, his death shattered the young democracy. Yuan's massive northern army broke into cliques under his lieutenants. Troops pillaged the local population, collecting taxes at gunpoint. Foreign mercenaries, military advisors, and soldiers of fortune of all stripes poured into China. Some warlords only control a single province. The most powerful dominate 2 or 3. A few seize power in hopes of guarding constitutionalism until the republic can reemerge. But the majority govern through naked exploitation. In Manchuria, Japanese interests back a warlord who's basically a bandit king, giving them open access to China's industrial heartland. Everyone wants Beijing. Whoever holds the capital gets both foreign recognition and access to tax revenue. So the warlords take it from each other again and again. In the 12 years following Yuan's death, China will have no less than 6 heads of state and 25 different political cabinets. The dethroned child emperor, now a political pawn, will get briefly reinstalled twice. This marked the darkest period in Sun's life. His flower of Republican China had been snipped before it could bloom. 2 decades worth of work destroyed. Even after the Japanese agreed to fund his rebellion, he'd arrived too late and once again lost the initiative. His nationalists played little part in dethroning Yuan. The warlords all had more troops. Sun questioned everything. He decided it had been naive to expect China to simply transition to democracy. The people were unfamiliar with it, and a new republic with its inherent factionalism could never stand up against authoritarian warlords. So he wouldn't found a democracy then, at least not at first. His next government would be a single-party military one, with the hope of securing the country and instructing the people in Republican government before transitioning to democracy. Sun reorganized the Kuomintang into a party that stressed obedience to political doctrine, a move that drove away some allies. And with few options available, he relied on Shanghai's criminal syndicates to serve as foot soldiers. These weren't triads. Triads were rebel groups. These were gangsters. And from those ranks came a new lieutenant, an infantry officer named Chiang Kai-shek. Brutal but effective, Chiang brought a ruthlessness to the nationalists that Sun lacked. Sun disliked killing and tried to avoid it. Chiang, by contrast, once assassinated a man as he lay in a hospital bed. With these new allies, Sun traveled to Guangzhou and formed his new state, declaring it China's legitimate government. Members of parliament loyal to Sun convened and declared him Grand Marshal. and he began preparing a military campaign, a northern expedition to retake the country. And with the nation split over whether China should enter World War I, Sun sought funds from both Allied and Central powers, trying to play one against the other. Other than secret support from Germany, he received little. On top of that, Sun's first northern expedition failed. He was outmatched. His forces were so small, he couldn't even remain in Guangzhou unless the provincial warlords allowed it. By 1918, they grew tired of Sun, killed his bodyguards and chief lieutenants, and removed him as Grand Marshal. His government collapsing, Sun fled to his house in Shanghai to write. And this period of self-doubt leaked into Sun's private life as well. While in exile 3 years before, Sun married his young secretary. Despite the scandal, due to the fact he never officially divorced his first wife, the new Madame Sun proved indispensable to setting down his political philosophy. For 2 years, Sun wrote as much as possible. He restated his plans for a Republican government, and argued that any future republic must include the right to both elect and recall officials. He collected essays into books, and he set out a radical infrastructure plan, proposing that China lay down over 100,000 miles of rail and roads to connect its cities, dam the Yangtze River for hydroelectric power, and establish 2 new ports. Though deeply unrealistic at the time, it would essentially create the development plan China still follows today.
All right. So poor Sun Yat-sen, this guy is, he succeeds and then things are not good for him, right? So what is China divided into early on?
Cliques, lords, warlords, 6 heads, 25, so I can't think of that word. But
Cabinet.
Well, especially
Cabinets,
the word you got, I think you meant, I heard you say Armir, the key word I was looking for, that's all right, were warlords, right? That's excellent. So the political system is broken down, but remember, there's still armies, there's still soldiers, and they still have loyalty to their commanders. And so a lot of those commanders will essentially become like military governors. But remember, we talked about this before, the Chinese command structure was fractured. You had a Northern Army, you had, remember, Northern Navy, Southern Navy, Northern Fleet, Southern Fleet, you had the Beiyang Army, you have all these different regional armies. Remember we talked about that's how you dealt with the Taiping Rebellion. There was in Guofan. So you have all these armies who are essentially regional in nature, who don't have a single national command structure. So they basically divide up China. So you have all these different warlords who each command their own area and each have their own army. And instead of using those armies to unify China, they use their armies to fight amongst themselves. Right? They mentioned that there quite a bit. So again, this is why military strength is so important. Right? You have to hold this together. You need military strength to overcome all these soldiers. And this is one reason why China tends to emphasize unity, unity, unity. And I made a joke, remember, how the soldiers were like the same height. And to me, that seems kind of curious. But for the Chinese, that emphasizes this unity that we need so we don't fall apart. Because that's what happened like 100 years ago. And Sun's political situation, good or bad?
Bad.
It is terrible. He doesn't have an army. Remember, he doesn't have an army. He was outside of China raising money from overseas Chinese. He did not have an internal support base. He did not have his own army. So his political situation is terrible. He's not in a place where he can do anything, right? And who then does he have to rely on? Other warlords, right? He has to rely on that guy, remember they mentioned Chiang Kai-shek, right? Who will be like his enforcer, who will kill people on their hospital beds. Chiang Kai-shek's a fascinating man. We'll talk more about him, but when you read the New Life movement reading for this weekend, he's behind that. Right? So remember, a guy who killed people on their hospital bed, he's behind this. This is one reason why he's such a fascinating guy. And this leads to his ideas to change. Right? I'm sorry, this question, this is something I added later. You can ignore this question because it's basically his powerlessness that makes him rethink his ideas. How are his ideas changing? What does he think that you have to have before you have democracy?
A strong army and a strong government.
Right, strong government. What kind of government should that be?
have the right to
eventually.
Or one party.
Right. Well, you're correct for later. What he says is we need a one-party government. We tried this whole thing where we had elections, we had a republic right from the beginning, and wow, that did not work out well, did it? Right? My party became illegal, this guy became dictator who didn't even believe in democracy, then the whole thing fell apart. So Sun Yat-sen has an important transformation. He still believes in these things that Amir and Dylan are mentioning, but we can't have them right away. China's not ready for these things. Chinese people, gotta remember, the vast majority of Chinese people at this time were illiterate. How can we deal with this? How can we have a democracy when most people can't read? So we need a tutelary period where you have single party rule, and then it will eventually develop into a democracy. So you have a temporary dictatorship that will eventually become democracy, right? That's his hope. By the way, that's basically what happened in the Republic of Korea, in Taiwan, and in the Philippines. Right? With varying degrees of effectiveness, you could say, but that is essentially what happened. But notice, one-party government. They tried a government with several parties, didn't work well. Not work well. And this, again, is how our experiences shape us. From the American perspective, we think you should have multiple political parties. Our systems work well enough. Right? No one will say it's perfect, but from the very beginning, almost, we had multiple parties. Didn't hurt us. It hurt China. So when the Chinese look at this history, they have a very different response than when we look at our history. So basically, there's no effective central government in China now. Right? The Qing weren't that great, but they were a central government. There's no clear ideology. They got rid of the old ideology of Confucianism. Nothing's replaced it. There's no clear direction of where to go. Again, we had the same basic question we had over 100 years ago, or about 100 years ago. What should change? How much should it change? No one's been able to answer that question effectively. The provincial assemblies had encouraged provincial loyalties, as had these provincial armies. And remember how we talked about China? This is like the first day of class. Remember how we talked about macro regions? China's the size of Europe. China could be divided and exist as several countries. Right, there is a possibility of having multiple countries in China. And that's what it's kind of going to. And like I said, in the revolution, the armies were powerful. The role of the military encouraged the rise of warlords, these military rulers of different areas, all of whom think they should be the one in charge and who are going to fight each other. So we now have a civil war. I don't think this is the way the Chinese talk about it. I'm going to talk about that this way. We essentially have a civil war. Not between two sides, but between like a dozen or more sides. Right? China has really fallen apart. All right. So we will, and so you can see again from that speech, this emphasis on strength and unity, you can kind of understand, I think, better why. But we'll pick up with this again on Monday, section 6. Don't forget to take the 2 quizzes, and we'll start talking about the issue of ethnicity in China.